said, the spread of Christianity wasn't entirely a conscious effort. Warfare and the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 led to the diaspora of Jewish and Christian communities alike.
What if the rise of Christianity had less to do with chance and more to do with a blueprint hidden in plain sight? Christianity's rise is usually explained through belief, miracles, and devotion.
Elon Musk's XAI,
Grok AI,
Grok AI,
Grok AI,
Elon Musk's AI chatbot.
But Grok's breakdown highlights something deeper, a long-term strategic framework that allowed the faith to survive wars, reshape cultures, and hold influence for over 2 millennia.
The angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city.
Today, we explore the mechanics behind that endurance and the ideas that kept Christianity powerful across centuries.
Fascinating biblical discoveries have been uncovered at ancient Shiloh.
So, stick with me because what you're about to hear goes way beyond Sunday school history. The surprising beginning. Christianity didn't start with political power or grand cathedrals. It began in an obscure corner of the Roman Empire with a traveling preacher who was executed as a criminal. By all accounts, this religion should have disappeared after Jesus' crucifixion. The disciples were terrified, scattered, and hiding. The Roman authorities had dealt with rebellious religious movements before, and they usually crushed them without much effort. But something different happened here. Within just a few years after Jesus' death, small communities of believers started popping up throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. These weren't wealthy elites or powerful politicians. Most early Christians were ordinary people, artisans, merchants, slaves, and freedmen. They met in homes, shared meals together, and practiced their faith quietly, often in secret because acknowledging their beliefs could mean imprisonment or death. The Roman Empire was vast, stretching from Britain to North Africa, from Spain to the Middle East. It had well-established religions, impressive temples, and gods who had been worshipped for centuries. Christianity came in as an outsider, a sect that initially grew out of Judaism. The odds were stacked against it. The early Christians refused to worship Roman gods or acknowledge the emperor as divine, which made them targets for persecution. Emperors like Nero and Diocletian launched brutal campaigns against them, leading to public executions, confiscation of property, and the destruction of Christian texts. Yet, despite all this opposition, Christianity kept growing. By the early 4th century, scholars estimate that Christians made up around 5% of the Roman Empire's population, roughly 3 million people out of 60 million. That might not sound like much, but it represented explosive growth for a religion that had started with just a handful of followers 3 centuries earlier. Something about this faith was resonating with people across different cultures, languages, and social classes. The question is, what was the strategy behind this remarkable expansion?
These forced journeys led to the establishment of Judeo-Christian communities around the known world. These groups transported their forms of worship, spiritual studies and insights, and charitable activities as pilgrims.
The grassroots approach. One of Christianity's earliest and most effective strategies was its focus on ordinary people. While other religions in the Roman Empire required expensive sacrifices, access to specific temples, or membership in exclusive mystery cults, Christianity offered something different. It was open to everyone, regardless of social status, wealth, gender, or ethnicity. You didn't need to be rich to participate. You didn't need special knowledge or initiation into secret rites. All you needed was faith. Early Christians spread their message primarily through personal relationships, According to historians, most conversions happen not through famous missionaries standing in public squares, but through everyday conversations. A Christian merchant would talk to their neighbor about their faith. A Christian slave would share their beliefs with fellow slaves. Family members would discuss their new religion around the dinner table. This grassroots approach made Christianity feel accessible and relatable. The Apostle Paul traveled extensively throughout the Roman Empire, establishing communities in major cities like Ephesus, Corinth, and Rome itself. But Paul's genius was in creating networks. He established churches, appointed local leaders, and then moved on to the next city while maintaining contact through letters. These letters, many of which became part of the New Testament, provided guidance, addressed problems, and strengthened the connections between scattered Christian communities.
His message proved so compelling to the masses because, despite the grandeur of these urban areas, they also contained barely concealed social problems.
This created a web of interconnected believers who supported each other across vast distances. Christians also benefited from the Roman Empire's infrastructure in unexpected ways. The famous Roman roads, built for military and administrative purposes, made travel safer and faster than ever before. The common use of Greek as a language of commerce and culture meant that Christian texts and teachings could spread more easily. When the Gospels were written in Koine Greek, the everyday Greek spoken throughout the empire, they became accessible to millions of people who couldn't read Hebrew or Aramaic. Another crucial aspect of this grassroots strategy was the way Christians lived their daily lives. In crowded urban centers where people lived in close quarters, neighbors could observe each other constantly. Christians stood out because of how they treated each other and even outsiders. They cared for their sick, buried their dead with dignity, and supported widows and orphans. This practical demonstration of their beliefs was more powerful than any sermon.
The sporadic persecutions faced by these communities made Christian groups very close-knit as they relied on one another for preservation.
Adapting without losing identity. Christianity faced a fascinating challenge as it spread. How do you maintain your core message while making it understandable to people from completely different cultural backgrounds? The early Christians had to walk a careful line between adaptation and maintaining their identity. This balance became one of their most sophisticated strategies. When Christianity first emerged, it was deeply rooted in Jewish tradition. The earliest Christians were Jews who believed Jesus was the promised Messiah. But as the faith spread beyond Jewish communities, church leaders had to make crucial decisions. Did non-Jewish converts need to follow Jewish law? Did they need to be circumcised? Did they need to observe Jewish dietary restrictions? These weren't just theological questions. They had practical implications for how widely Christianity could spread. The decision to welcome non-Jewish converts without requiring them to follow all Jewish laws was transformative. It opened Christianity to the entire Gentile world. At the same time, Christians kept their Jewish roots through the Hebrew Bible, which they called the Old Testament. This gave Christianity ancient legitimacy while allowing it to reach new audiences. As Christianity moved into different regions, it encountered various cultural practices and beliefs. In the Roman world, people were used to worshiping multiple gods, participating in civic religious festivals, and honoring local deities. Many early converts didn't immediately understand that Christianity required exclusive devotion to one God. Some tried to add Jesus to their existing collection of gods, viewing him as another powerful deity rather than the only path to salvation. Christian leaders had to address this confusion while being sensitive to local customs. They adopted certain cultural practices that didn't conflict with core Christian beliefs. Scholars note that some pagan festivals were repurposed for Christian celebrations. The winter solstice celebration became Christmas. Spring fertility festivals were transformed into Easter observances. This was a practical adaptation that helped people understand new concepts through familiar cultural frameworks. The process of translating Christian concepts into different languages and cultural contexts required creativity. How do you explain concepts like grace, redemption, or the Trinity to people who have completely different religious backgrounds? Christian missionaries and theologians developed new vocabulary, used local analogies, and found ways to make abstract theological ideas concrete and understandable.
The first believers in Jesus called one another saints or members of the way. Both terms had deep religious significance.
The game-changing moment. Everything changed on October 28, 312 CE, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Constantine, one of several men vying for control of the Roman Empire, was preparing to fight his rival, Maxentius. According to historical accounts, Constantine had a vision the night before the battle. Different sources describe it differently. Some say he saw a cross of light in the sky with the words, "Conquer by this," while others describe a dream where God instructed him to use Christian symbols. Whether the vision was genuine religious experience or clever political calculation remains debated by historians. What's undeniable is what happened next. Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint Christian symbols on their shields. He won the battle decisively, with Maxentius drowning in the Tiber River during the chaos. Constantine interpreted his victory as divine favor from the Christian God. The following year, in 313 CE, Constantine and his co-emperor Licinius issued the Edict of Milan. This decree granted religious tolerance throughout the empire and specifically ended the persecution of Christians. For the first time, Christians could worship openly without fear of arrest, torture, or execution. The edict also returned confiscated church property and made Christianity a legal religion with the same standing as traditional Roman religions. Constantine's conversion had massive ripple effects. He didn't make Christianity the official state religion immediately. That would come later under Emperor Theodosius in 380 CE. But Constantine gave Christianity political legitimacy and imperial patronage. He funded the construction of churches, including what would become some of Christianity's most important sites. He exempted Christian clergy from certain taxes and military service. He even got involved in theological disputes, summoning the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE to resolve conflicts about the nature of Christ. Critics at the time, and historians since, have questioned Constantine's motivations. Some argue he was truly converted and believed Christianity could unify his empire. Others suggest he recognized Christianity's growing influence and saw it as a useful tool for consolidating power. The truth probably contains elements of both. What matters is that Constantine's support transformed Christianity from a marginalized sect into a religion with access to wealth, political influence, and institutional power. This shift created new opportunities, but also new challenges for Christianity. With imperial backing came imperial interference. Constantine and subsequent emperors felt entitled to involve themselves in church affairs, appointing bishops, settling theological debates, and using religious authority to strengthen political control. The relationship between church and state became complicated in ways that would define European politics for centuries.
When Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan in AD 313, Christianity received formal legalization.
Building an intellectual fortress. Once Christianity gained legal status and imperial support, church leaders faced a new challenge: developing a comprehensive intellectual framework that could compete with Greek philosophy and Roman legal thinking. Christianity needed to be more than just emotional faith. It needed to be intellectually respectable and internally consistent. The early church fathers took on this task with remarkable dedication. Theologians like Augustine of Hippo, Jerome, and Ambrose of Milan worked to reconcile Christian teachings with the philosophical traditions of the classical world. They engaged with Platonic and Aristotelian philosophy, demonstrating that Christian thought could stand alongside the great intellectual achievements of antiquity. Augustine's writings, in particular, proved foundational. His works addressed fundamental questions about the nature of God, the problem of evil, human free will, and the relationship between faith and reason. He developed complex theological concepts like original sin and predestination that would shape Christian doctrine for centuries. By showing that Christianity could provide sophisticated answers to deep philosophical questions, these thinkers gave the faith intellectual credibility. The development of systematic theology gave Christianity something that many other religions lacked: a detailed, logically organized body of doctrine. Church councils gathered to debate and define core beliefs, producing statements of faith like the Nicene Creed. These creeds provided clear boundaries for what Christians believed, distinguishing Orthodox Christianity from various heretical movements. This doctrinal clarity helped Christianity maintain coherence, even as it spread across diverse cultures. Christian scholars also engaged in what we might call apologetics, defending Christianity against critics and explaining it to skeptics. They wrote treatises answering objections raised by pagan philosophers and Jewish scholars. They demonstrated how Christian teachings fulfilled Old Testament prophecies. They argued that Christianity offered better answers to life's big questions than competing religions or philosophical systems. The intellectual work wasn't just theological. Christian thinkers also engaged with law, ethics, and political philosophy. They developed comprehensive theories about justice, authority, and the proper ordering of society. This gave Christianity relevance beyond personal spirituality. It offered a complete worldview that addressed how societies should be organized and how individuals should live together. This intellectual sophistication served multiple purposes. It attracted educated converts who might have dismissed Christianity as a religion for the uneducated masses. It gave Christian leaders tools to engage with political authorities on equal terms. It created a shared intellectual foundation that united Christians across different regions and languages, and it provided resources for future generations of Christian thinkers to build upon.
After centuries of persecution, the sudden radical acceptance by a Roman emperor left many Christians breathing a sigh of relief.
The monopoly on knowledge. As the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century CE, Europe descended into what's often called the Dark Ages, a period of political fragmentation, economic decline, and cultural disruption. In this chaotic environment, the Christian Church became the primary institution preserving literacy, learning, and the knowledge of the ancient world. This monopoly on education proved to be one of Christianity's most powerful long-term strategies, though it probably developed more through circumstance than deliberate planning. Monasteries became islands of learning in a largely illiterate world. Monks followed the rule of Saint Benedict, established in 529 CE at Monte Cassino, which required them to devote specific hours each day to reading and studying Scripture. This seemingly simple requirement had enormous consequences. To read Scripture, monks needed to be literate. To preserve texts, they needed to copy them by hand. Over time, monasteries developed scriptoria, dedicated writing rooms where monks painstakingly copied religious texts, classical works, and historical chronicles. The process of creating a handwritten book was incredibly labor-intensive and expensive. A single large Bible might require 300 animal skins and take 2 to 3 years to complete. Books were precious objects, often decorated with elaborate illuminations and bound in expensive materials. Most people would never own a book or even see one up close. This made those who could read and write, primarily monks and clergy, extraordinarily valuable. Monastic libraries became repositories of knowledge. Monks didn't only copy Christian texts, they also preserved works by classical authors like Virgil, Cicero, Ovid, and Aristotle. Much of what we know about ancient Greek and Roman civilization survived because monks considered it worth preserving and copying. Without this work, countless works of classical literature, history, and philosophy would have been lost forever. Beyond monasteries, the Church established cathedral schools and later supported the development of universities. The University of Bologna was founded in 1088, followed by Oxford in 1096, and the University of Paris in 1150. While these universities eventually became somewhat independent from direct church control, they were originally ecclesiastical institutions, and theology remained the queen of sciences for centuries. Education at these institutions followed a standardized curriculum called the 7 liberal arts, divided into the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Students studied in Latin, the language of the Church, which created a common intellectual culture across Europe. A scholar from England could communicate with one from Italy or Germany because they shared this Latin education. This control over education gave the Church enormous cultural power. Church schools determined what knowledge was considered worth learning. Church scholars decided which texts were copied and preserved. Church universities trained not just clergy, but also lawyers, physicians, and administrators who would serve in royal courts and civil governments. Almost every educated person in medieval Europe had been taught by the Church or in church-sponsored institutions. The economics of salvation. Christianity developed a sophisticated economic model that generated enormous wealth and influence. The Church created complex financial systems that made it one of the wealthiest and most powerful landowners in medieval Europe. Understanding these economic strategies reveals another dimension of Christianity's enduring power. The foundation of church wealth was land. Through donations, bequests, and strategic acquisitions, the Church accumulated vast estates throughout Europe. When nobles died, they often left property to the Church in hopes of securing salvation or having prayers said for their souls. Kings granted land to monasteries and bishoprics as rewards for loyalty or to strengthen the church's presence in newly conquered territories. Over centuries, these gifts accumulated into enormous holdings. By the High Middle Ages, the church was the largest landowner in most European countries. These estates generated revenue through farming, rents, and various fees. Peasants who lived on church lands paid dues to their ecclesiastical lords, just as they would to secular nobility. Monasteries often became major agricultural producers, developing efficient farming techniques and managing resources carefully. Some monastic orders, particularly the Cistercians, became renowned for their agricultural innovations and economic management. The church also collected tithes, a mandatory 10% tax on income that was supposed to support the clergy and maintain church buildings. This provided a steady stream of revenue from virtually every household in Christian Europe. Failure to pay tithes could result in spiritual penalties, including excommunication, which made this an effective collection system. Perhaps the most controversial economic practice was the sale of indulgences. Based on the theological concept that the church could dispense spiritual merit from the treasury of merit accumulated by Christ and the saints, indulgences promised to reduce time in purgatory, either for the purchaser or for deceased loved ones. While the theology behind indulgences was complex, in practice, they functioned as a form of fundraising that generated substantial revenue. The construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome was partially funded through indulgence sales, a practice that would eventually spark Martin Luther's protests and the Protestant Reformation. The church also controlled many practical services that generated income. Marriage ceremonies, baptisms, funerals, and other sacraments often involved fees. Churches charged for prayers to be said for the dead. Monasteries offered hospitality to travelers, often accepting donations in return. Pilgrimage sites collected offerings from the faithful who came seeking miracles or spiritual merit. This economic power translated into political influence. Bishops and abbots often had incomes that rivaled or exceeded those of secular nobility. They could maintain armed retainers, build impressive buildings, and fund ambitious projects. They could loan money to kings and nobles, creating relationships of obligation. The wealth of the church made it impossible for secular rulers to ignore ecclesiastical interests. The architecture of awe. Walk into any medieval cathedral and you'll immediately feel something. The soaring stone vaults stretching impossibly high, the colored light streaming through stained glass windows, the cool silence broken only by whispered prayers and echoing footsteps. This isn't accidental. Christian leaders understood that physical spaces could communicate power, inspire devotion, and reinforce religious messages in ways that sermons alone never could. The architectural strategy of Christianity was carefully designed to create awe and demonstrate authority. Early Christians met in homes and simple buildings. They had no choice. They were a persecuted minority without resources or official recognition. But once Christianity gained legal status and imperial patronage, church construction became a priority. Constantine himself commissioned grand basilicas in Rome, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. These early churches established architectural patterns that would influence Christian building for centuries. Long rectangular halls, decorated interiors, and prominent altars. As Christianity spread and grew wealthier, church architecture became increasingly ambitious. The Romanesque style emerged in the 10th and 11th centuries, characterized by massive stone walls, round arches, and fortress-like construction. These churches communicated strength and permanence. They were buildings that could withstand time, just as Christianity claimed eternal truth. Then came the Gothic Revolution. Beginning in the 12th century, architects developed new techniques, pointed arches, flying buttresses, and ribbed vaults that allowed them to build higher and create larger windows than ever before. Gothic cathedrals reached toward heaven in ways that made viewers literally look up, their eyes drawn from earth to sky. The height was deliberate symbolism. The building itself pointed toward God. Stained glass windows served multiple purposes. For illiterate congregations, they functioned as the Bible of the poor, depicting biblical stories and saints' lives in brilliant colors. The light filtering through colored glass created an otherworldly atmosphere, transforming ordinary daylight into something that felt mystical and divine. The enormous investment required to create these windows demonstrated the church's wealth and commitment to beauty in worship. Every architectural element carried meaning. The cruciform floor plan, shaped like a cross, reminded worshippers of Christ's sacrifice. The orientation toward the east, where the sun rises, symbolized Christ as the light of the world and the resurrection. The high altar, raised above the congregation, established hierarchy and sacred space. The crypt below, often containing relics of saints, connected the visible church to the invisible communion of saints. Building these cathedrals required enormous resources and decades, sometimes centuries of work. Entire communities participated in their construction, with nobles providing funding, craftsmen donating labor, and ordinary people contributing what they could. The construction process itself became a form of religious devotion and civic pride. When a cathedral was finally completed, it stood as a monument to faith, a demonstration of what a community could achieve when united under Christian purpose. The art of adaptation revisited Christianity's ability to adjust to new environments, helped it spread far beyond its original setting. As the religion reached new continents, it adapted to local cultures while protecting its central teachings. This balance between flexibility in presentation and firmness in doctrine allowed Christianity to take root in regions with very different traditions. In Northern Europe, missionaries encountered communities with long-standing pagan customs. Instead of demanding an immediate break from these traditions, they often reshaped existing practices to fit Christian meaning. Sacred sites, seasonal festivals, and cultural symbols were reinterpreted within a Christian framework. This approach made conversion easier by reducing cultural disruption. This adaptive pattern appeared in many regions. Irish Christianity, for example, blended local artistic styles, storytelling, and monastic practices with the teachings of the Church. In China, some missionaries tried to connect Christian ideas with Confucian values. In Latin America, indigenous symbolism blended with Catholic practices under colonial rule. Although these adaptations sometimes involved conflict or coercion, they show how Christianity adjusted to different cultural contexts while keeping its core beliefs intact. The power of networks. Christianity created one of history's most effective organizational networks, connecting believers across continents and centuries through shared beliefs, common practices, and institutional structures. This networking strategy gave Christianity resilience, reach, and remarkable staying power that few other institutions could match. The hierarchical structure of the Church provided clear lines of authority and communication. At the top stood the Pope in Rome, claiming spiritual authority over all Christians in the West. Below him were cardinals, archbishops, bishops, and priests, each with defined responsibilities and jurisdictions. This pyramid structure meant that decisions made at the top could theoretically reach down to the smallest parish, while information from local communities could flow upward to church leadership. This organizational model had practical advantages. When heresies or controversies emerged in one region, the hierarchy could coordinate a response across multiple jurisdictions. When resources were needed, wealthier dioceses could support poorer ones. When political pressures threatened the church in one area, allies could be mobilized elsewhere. The network created redundancy and mutual support that helped Christianity survive periods when it faced existential threats in specific regions. Monastic orders created parallel networks within Christianity. Organizations like the Benedictines, Franciscans, Dominicans, and Jesuits maintained their own hierarchies and communication systems that crossed national boundaries. A Benedictine monk in England was connected to Benedictine communities in Italy, France, and Germany through shared rules, regular communication, and sometimes physical travel. These orders often specialized in specific missions. Dominicans focused on preaching and combating heresy. Franciscans emphasized poverty and service to the poor. Jesuits became known for education and missionary work. Pilgrimages created temporary networks that connected Christians across vast distances. Medieval pilgrims traveled from across Europe to Jerusalem, Rome, or Santiago de Compostela in Spain. These journeys mixed spiritual devotion with practical purposes. Pilgrims shared information, established business contacts, and created bonds with fellow travelers. Pilgrimage routes became economic arteries as towns along the way developed infrastructure to support travelers. The networks created by pilgrimage helped integrate Europe and spread ideas, goods, and cultural practices. Universities created intellectual networks. Scholars trained at Paris might teach at Oxford or Bologna, carrying ideas and methods across national boundaries. Latin, as the common language of learning, meant that academic work produced in one country could be immediately accessible to scholars everywhere. Theological debates and philosophical innovations spread rapidly through these networks, creating a shared intellectual culture throughout Christian Europe. The printing press, invented in the 15th century, revolutionized these networks. Before printing, hand-copied manuscripts were rare and expensive, limiting the spread of ideas. After Gutenberg, texts could be reproduced quickly and relatively cheaply. The Bible became more widely available. Theological treatises, devotional works, and religious controversies circulated more rapidly than ever before. This technological change amplified Christianity's existing networks and helped fuel both the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. The strategy of ultimate stakes. Christianity placed great importance on the afterlife, teaching that salvation or damnation depended on spiritual choices made during life. This belief shaped the behavior, motivation, and commitment of its followers. Many Christians accepted hardship, discipline, or even death because they believed these choices affected their eternal future. The Church strengthened this framework through its sacramental system. Baptism, confession, the Eucharist, and other rites were seen as necessary steps toward salvation. This gave the Church a central role in the spiritual lives of believers. Teachings about purgatory added further reasons for ongoing religious involvement, as prayers and masses were believed to help the souls of the deceased. These beliefs encouraged missionary work and reinforced church authority. Christians saw evangelization as a duty connected to concern for others' salvation. Church leaders used tools like excommunication to enforce discipline, since being cut off from the sacraments carried serious spiritual consequences. This structure kept communities aligned with church teaching and created strong incentives for participation. The institutional immortality strategy. Christianity built institutions designed to last beyond individual lifetimes. Its hierarchical structure ensured that leadership continued smoothly as each generation replaced the previous one. Procedures for electing popes, appointing bishops, and training clergy created predictable transitions that prevented disruption. Monastic communities added further stability. Many monasteries survived political upheavals and social changes because they operated independently of shifting governments. Their libraries, routines, and shared rules created continuity that lasted across centuries. Canon law supported this stability by providing a legal framework that governed church life and operated even when political systems around it changed. Education, tradition, and financial systems reinforced this long-term stability. Seminaries and universities trained new generations of leaders. Liturgical calendars, rituals, and shared practices created unified religious identity across time and place. Church property and endowments ensured financial continuity, allowing institutions to survive periods of crisis and continue their work across many generations.
Many fringe Christian groups lost their legal status because they were considered heretical.
Across 2,000 years, Christianity grew from a small persecuted group into a global institution by using practical strategies such as strong community networks, support from influential rulers, control of education, steady economic systems, and durable organizational structures. This perspective focuses on the human methods behind its expansion rather than its spiritual message. The religion endured because it adapted to different eras while keeping a clear identity, preserved knowledge during unstable times, provided social support, and offered people a sense of meaning. Today, with over 2 billion followers, many of these systems still appear in updated forms as churches adjust to new cultures and maintain worldwide networks. Which factor do you think mattered most? Imperial support, early community building, or something else? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more explorations into major historical forces.